told me to do things, and I did those things. And the problem is that a lot of people would just write letters. They wouldn't call the places with me that needed to be called. So then when I tried to turn in the letters, I was told by the police officers, well, how do we know you didn't write that? A lot of them have people's phone numbers on them, links to get in contact with them, all sorts of stuff. However, police did not want to listen. What they wanted to do was continue to harass me everywhere I went and try to push me into moving elsewhere. That's because of slander against me that I was never allowed to defend myself against. What's this got to do with Kandace? Not a goddamn thing. Ain't none of this her fault. She didn't make this shit happen. She didn't choose other people to do harmful things to me. So let me tell you about her. With many people, I choose to take their stories and use them for my own personal gain. The reason for that is because they're heavily involved in the situation, and I do stand to gain from them telling the truth, even if it means I have to show it. Now, what's this Edwards lady got to do with it? Well, let's tell her story. I don't have much time left here at the hotel room. I've got until 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. I probably won't be sleeping because I have severe anxiety. There's a lady whose phone call I've been waiting on back. But this lady, Kandace Edwards, her story is important. And the things that she is going through and the fact that she's still fighting it is also very important. As far as Alabama laws, she knows her stuff very well. Also, federal laws. She's able to quote me even the statute numbers. Now, if you guys don't know who this is, I recommend looking her name up. Kandace Edwards. Her case is pretty big. Her kids were illegally stolen from her. They were human trafficked, and so is she. So she is trying to give a voice to the voiceless. She's got a page. It's called, hold on a second, A Small Person's Voice, I believe. I'm going to go into the hotel now that I'm done with my cigarette, and we're actually going to get familiar with her case. We're going to get familiar with the abuse that she's been going through. Now, she is won a little bit of her stuff, but she's got a long road to go. Now, there's a good possibility that after 11 o'clock tomorrow, I might not be able to send the evidence that she's going to need, or that anyone else is going to need as far as procedures go. Kandace is someone who is fighting for our rights. Now, her case has been picked up by multiple news agencies. She is being heard. She has a lot of abilities that I don't have, and I'd like to learn some of those abilities. The importance cannot be stated enough of having another person to understand what's going on. like literally your case. Having someone that has to try to learn about 6 years at once while having their own thing going on, that is not easy at all. And I've noticed she's helping out a lot of people. She has her own podcast. I know I'm real tough to handle. I'm not really well liked. And you know also that I've used my notoriety to try to bring attention to other people's causes before. Let's get familiar with this. I'm gonna stop watching Cromwell. I was just using it so my computer wouldn't turn off. It's kind of a judge of whether or not my computer is downloading something. All right. Kandace Edwards of Alabama. A small person with a huge voice. Let's turn this around. A small person with a huge voice. A podcast anchor. Let's click on this. A small person with a huge voice. This is her podcast. The things that she's gone through are inhumane. They're horrible. But she's got her own podcast, and she speaks out very well for her. And I'm glad that she does. She's had a lot of people kick her in the teeth. Now, what happened with her? Well, she was homeless. She helped somebody out. And that person that she helped out cashed a check. She was just trying to do a favor for somebody, and it turned out that she got ripped off, and DHR here destroyed her life in Etowah County and Cleburne County, Alabama. Now, this is dated from July 6th of 2021. There's a few of them that I've read. This is her, Kandace K. Edwards. The things that she's gone through with her children being taken, with going through debtor's prison, through people outright violating her rights, lying to her, lying about her, and here, May 18th, 2017, Huffington Post. Police had arrested and jailed Kandace Edwards, a 29-year-old mother of two, on Wednesday after she allegedly forged a $75 check. It's not quite what happened, but that's the point. It ended up costing her thousands and thousands of dollars, plus having her, well, a lot of things happen. Says, this one, Amsterdam News, talks about NFL players behind Take a Knee lies this racial injustice. Now in Randolph County, October 17th, 2017. This is the day before my birthday, in 2017. Natalie's still alive at this point, but I've been going through hell. Now this lady is going through her own personal hell. It says, in Randolph County, Alabama, 29-year-old Kandace Edwards, unemployed, homeless, and 7 months pregnant, allegedly forged a $75 check. But then there's all of the stuff that they have been putting her through because of it. Now, she was able to try to get people to actually listen to her, and a lot of people have. a lot of the things that were done to me were also done to her. That's because, as I've shown on my channel many times, not that anybody cares, these things are nationwide. Now, this is Colin Kaepernick. As many of y'all may know, myself, Jerry Sparks, Tyler Frericks, Jennifer Frericks, Lana Engeline, and Amanda Engeline stopped being friends over Colin Kaepernick because Tyler thought posting up a racist post asking for a soldier to punch Colin Kaepernick in the throat was okay. It's not okay. That could have killed Colin Kaepernick. And saying a soldier should do it, no, they absolutely shouldn't. Now, here, this Amsterdam News, New York, they're actually talking about Colin Kaepernick, my favorite hero of this century so far. And it's also talking about here in Dallas, a 49-year-old grandmother spent 2 months in jail on $150,000 bail after being accused of shoplifting $105 worth of school uniforms for her grandkids. She was not jailed because she posed a threat, but because she was too poor to purchase her freedom. Now, this is what has been used against me repeatedly. I try to turn in my predators. They commit crimes against me, and I don't have the money to bail myself out, and I don't have any friends or family that will. Now, one of my friends actually did, but she never spoke up about it. It says in Randolph County, Alabama, a 29-year-old Kandace Edwards, unemployed, homeless, and 7 months pregnant, allegedly forged a $75 check, slapped with a $7,500 bail amount she could not pay. Edwards slept on a mat in the jail for one night before a judge granted her a temporary reprieve. She slept in there for one night. I have spent so much time in the last 6 years incarcerated, longer than a night, being repeatedly assaulted. Am I to pretend like this lady didn't have to endure anything because of it? No, but it does show the leniency that women are given as far as things of this nature go. But also, the thing is that Edwards should have never been arrested. And this is a situation where they're kind of trying to claim that because of skin color, that, well, Miss Edwards got leniency and that this 49-year-old grandmother did not, and that it was likely because of, well, here what does it say? Too poor to purchase her freedom. Now here's a $7,500 bail amount that Edwards couldn't pay, and she had to be jailed for a night. Now, it's a big difference in months. Now, how is it that you guys want to interpret that? Do you want to interpret it that it's a comparison of one person's color against another? Or are we looking at what Colin Kaepernick is obviously been pushing? It's not just black people. Unlike Zaid Atkinson and Samuel Leon Lawrence IV, it's not just for black people. Do these individuals pose a threat to our communities? Now, here's the thing, is that people pose a threat to me because of slander. And that goes for a lot of others as well. It says 75% of people who are locked up are there for low-level offenses like drug or property crime, according to a study by Criminal Justice Policy Program at Harvard Law School. There's also people like me who are incarcerated for absolutely no reason except assumed guilt. And the felonies that were committed against me in order for them to try to justify what they did, it's a horrible thing to live through. Now, when I say that this right here is an unfair comparison, the comparison of Edwards, she lost more than $75 or $7,500 over a $75 check. There was so much more that happened after this that really did destroy every part of her family. And this is not an okay thing to do. This is literally the same thing that happened to me. The destruction of my family unit, my protection. I was cut off from them over lies. And here it says it's just a matter of money. If you have it, or if your family manages to scrape together savings, you can buy your way out. If you don't, you sit in jail and wait for your day in court. Every night there are close to 450,000 people in America in jails waiting, still presumed innocent but too poor to get out. That also makes it so that with our public pretenders being too lazy to do their jobs, they claim that they have an overwhelming caseload and therefore can't do it for everyone. Well, if that is the case, then they need to write that down. All of my public pretenders told me that they had overwhelming caseloads. None of them would write it down and sign their name to it. It's just an excuse for lazy people. Now, this is their excuses for not doing their job for me. I can only imagine the excuses that these folks had. I did really get a lot more excuses than that, though. It says a system that keeps people locked up because of poverty is morally reprehensible. It also has outsized effects. As people sit in jail awaiting trial, they lose their jobs. When they don't earn an income, they can't pay their rent, buy their family food, or make car payments. That's what happened to Lavette Mays, who at age 47 sat in jail for 14 months for a first-time offense, unable to pay 10% of her bail amount, $25,000, or the amount needed to get out of jail. She lost her job, home, and couldn't care for her children. Now, are you guys not drawing the similarities between all of these situations and mine? These things happen to me repeatedly and cost me a whole lot more money, and prevented me from turning in my predators, made me a target worldwide. I have people who harass me from all over the world on the internet, but in real life, I also have to worry about threats, harassment, and assaults from people who can very much reach out and touch me or my family and hurt them very much. It says here, like much of the criminal justice system, the bail system disproportionately harms communities of color. Not as much as you might think, just so you know. The disproportionate nature is entirely based on poverty. The majority of those incarcerated were homeless when they were arrested. Their guilt was assumed, and they were never allowed to show evidence, never allowed to face their accusers. They were victimized until they had nothing, and either they plead guilty to a crime that they didn't commit, or they lose everything, including the evidence that shows the abuse they were enduring. Most of the time, if a homeless person tries to turn in a crime against them, they are threatened, harassed, intimidated, and or assaulted and arrested. Sometimes they're taken directly to the jail, sometimes they're taken to the hospital, where the police officers tell the hospital staff that you're schizophrenic or delusional. That is the most common, and then you are given drugs. Anyway, it says here, like much of criminal justice system, the bail system disproportionately harms communities of color. According to the American Civil Liberties Union, black people are twice as likely to be in jail because they can't afford bail as their white counterparts. Well, see, now we're comparing based on color. We are not looking at the poverty level or separation between which white people and which black people. Poverty is a much bigger issue and a much bigger excuse for people to harm. But these guys, ACLU, don't care about the homeless. We barely become a footnote every decade about, well, we should probably do something about this. And then they go right back to only fighting for minorities, only actually fighting for minorities. I don't mean financial minorities like the homeless. I mean, just the skin color is the focus. What I'm angry about when it comes to how black people are treated is that we have laws that make those things illegal already. And we literally, every 10 years, remake those laws. We have no teeth attached to those laws. It's already more illegal for somebody to harm a black person than to harm a disabled person. Because people actually care about black folks in this country. The disabled, you want them to go to the back of the bus. They are over twice as likely to be killed by police and have the same numbers as black folks. However, the homeless have a much smaller population and account for a much higher percentage. Many of these situations where black people are being horribly, horribly misused and abused, including slavery, which still does exist nationwide. Well, but it has more to do with their assumed guilt, partially because of color, primarily because they just simply don't have the money for a real lawyer. So they're stuck with a public pretender who is not going to help them. The majority of these black folks were homeless when arrested. The majority of these white folks were homeless when arrested. They don't have the money for bail. They don't. The American people. Let me tell you something about Kandace. Through most of this, these people did pay attention exclusively to how important it is when you're too broke to do any of this. So much money in their directions. They didn't have one that ended up being me. Like this, oh my God, the disparity there. Yes. In many places, especially along the East Coast, primarily in the South, but a lot in the North too. There's a lot of immigrant neighborhoods where they are chosen from exclusively because, well, for example, a lot of the Asian communities that are in New York, and this is just what I've been told by a couple of people from New York, so don't take this as gospel. It's not. But there's the Chinese, or the China district in New York, and culturally, if you're a failure, being thrown out on the streets by your family in Chinatown is very scary, and it's also a situation where nobody's going to help you. You might get some food if you go through the dumpsters, but a lot of the business owners will chase you with a broom, just like in the movies. There's also situations where a lot of the ghettos, which are primarily for people of color, they weren't primarily for people of color to begin with. They were primarily to divert funds to ineffective housing units. And we're paying for this to this day. The crime in those areas, people are stuffed into very small areas, and you want to tell them to move. They don't have the money to move. They're stuck there. And culturally, their area is going to be ignored more. And this is a horrible thing because this racism, especially along the East Coast, is at a phenomenal level. Instances, we're talking about a 11-to-1 ratio of being arrested and incarcerated over your white counterparts. Now, literally, over 95% of these black people are homeless. They are chosen over homeless white people because a lot of people, we've also got a lot of people everywhere in America. They believe that this is culturally how information, right? Absolutely. This is a lady who is fighting her own battle, and her own safety needs to be recognized. And one thing with her is that the experiences that she's gone through are traumatic, extremely traumatic. And I do believe that for somebody like her or many of these other victims who have offered to help me, for any of them to be the ones that have to do this because there's no one else, this is a horrible thing to do to them. I mean, for me, I do believe that Colin Kaepernick is probably one of the few people who would actually fight for me if he knew what was going on. But obviously, I don't have any connection to a former forum for a while. I can go to my Facebook here and we'll see what's going on. Obviously, this has gone completely away from being about Kandace Edwards. But I do want to take the time to explain that, like many people who are on my friends list, which she is not, she's going through trauma of her own. And I see the good that she's trying to do for others and the number of people that she's able to help just with her story. And I want to encourage everyone to look at her story themselves. I want you guys to listen to her podcast yourselves. She's got a lot of beliefs that are not even close to mine, and that's okay. She is allowed to have differences of opinion. She's also allowed to have panic attacks and to feel overwhelmed. And especially with me, you guys know me, I am a very overwhelming individual. So it's important to make sure that she doesn't get overwhelmed and that a lot of the other victims don't get overwhelmed. And the best way to do that is not to make those people work with me. It's not to overwhelm somebody with your story, with the situation that's going on. And with Kandace Edwards and all of the work that she is doing for others while going through her own thing, would working with me be such a horrible thing? How about with Colin Kaepernick? Well, actually, yes, I have nonstop panic attacks because I'm constantly being told to do things I've already done, constantly forced to move to another place where I'm victimized again and again over people's assumptions of homelessness. I also know that in most of the places that I go, people of color are more likely to be victimized than I. So I do keep mindful of that. I know that here in Tillamook, there is a lot of racism. There is a heavy KKK following. I also know that Caitlin is not trying to push any sort of hatred of that sort. I know that after listening to her, she's got different religious beliefs than me, and that is okay. There's really only two people that know what my religion is. That's my little sister and, well, I thought Brenda Dickinson understood, but she doesn't. And Natalie, her and I had the same religion. But you guys aren't gonna understand that. For Caitlin Edwards, she's already won a few of her court dates. She's on a far stretch. She is doing it mostly by herself. She's doing the paperwork mostly and primarily by herself. She does have a large collection of people that she has pieced together over the years, and she hasn't had a severe meltdown like mine probably in a while, if she has them at all. Obviously, I'm not her best friend. I'm not Colin Kaepernick's best friend. I'm not Donald Trump's best friend or Joe Biden's best friend. You know, these are pretty famous people, you know, relatively so, where I am more infamous. My panic attacks are infamous. My fear of human beings is infamous. Also, my willingness to speak up for others, even at my own peril, is infamous. Kandace Edwards tried to help somebody else out a long time ago, and she has been hurt every single day since because of it. This isn't a joke. This is an ungodly, horrible mess that she's walked into. How did she walk into it? Somebody needed a favor and she wanted to be a nice guy. Now for me, with 6 years of this, having to try to pound all that on one person at one time while I am losing everything around me, and I am deathly afraid of that. Afraid that the evidence will be lost or stolen, will not be a priority to others. So why am I bringing up this Caitlin lady? I'm bringing her up because she has a podcast, and I'm hoping that she'll tell my story on her podcast. I'm trying to reach out to her, and hopefully she'll be able to help me where a lot of other people haven't. When I'm reading about the stuff that she's gone through, I mean, you know, number one, homelessness. Yeah, that's covered. Number two, former foster kid. I'm going to have to ask her about that. Maybe you guys could ask her about that. There's a lot of details about people's lives that you may not listen to or may not hear. The fact that she was homeless when they started putting her through all this stuff shows that, yeah, even though the majority of this type of abuse by law enforcement is towards men, they don't care when you're homeless. I want to give a shout out to Claire Jordan. And the reason for that is because although Claire Jordan and I are not on speaking terms, and she is currently missing, Caitlin Edwards, her podcast can be used to reach out to so many people's voices. And you know what? I really truly believe that her voice needs to be heard. I truly believe that even with all of the comparisons and all of the details that different groups choose to push at others, I believe that the reality is all these people are people. All victims deserve to be heard. With Caitlin, I would prefer to have an interview with her and have her speak on my channel about her personal experiences. And also a lot of the stuff that she's learned about how to help others. Also, I want you guys to understand that because of her own personal trauma, if she was to try to help me, she might have a complete and total meltdown and actually not be able to talk to me. I mean, this is some pretty mortifying stuff, and she is extremely prone to, well, she's had her own trauma. She understands that when you go through trauma, that it's difficult not to be triggered. Now, the stuff that I've listened to on her podcast so far, I haven't gotten as familiar with it as I really would have liked to, because I did want to try to spend the time in my hotel room learning about and filling out a lot of stuff to get her evidence that's important. And there's a couple other people that I've been in contact with as well to try to make phone calls with me. I don't just stick to one person because I have to find somebody that I can trust. And that does take time. And that's the most horrible thing about asking someone to speak up after all of this. They're literally saving a life if they do, but they need to understand why, and that requires me being able to function and being able to send everything out. There have been so many people that I've sent evidence to that told me they couldn't see it. Or, of course, as soon as I sent it, then we were no longer friends and we were blocked from each other, or any manner of other electronic crap happens. Now, here's what I want to push for right now, is that a lot of the issues that different ones of us have, a lot of our issues as well as our resources may fluctuate through time. Sometimes you have a little bit of extra money because you're disabled and you're getting your back pay. But sometimes you end up having to spend all that back pay trying to jump through a bunch of hoops for people who may have good intentions, but they're doing very bad things in the long run because they're not thinking in the long run or thinking about anyone else. For example, right at the very beginning, there's a lot of people who told me that their families were being threatened. Kandace Bondurant, Aaron Cockerham, Sarah Nelson, I've got her recorded speaking about that too, and Carl Rogers, and, well, basically 3 or 4 dozen people who were all wanting to help and support me at the very beginning were telling me that people were threatening to kill them and their families. Now, this is something that I hope Kandace has not had to deal with. But also, if she hasn't had to deal with it, she's not going to be able to understand the sheer magnitude of violence that can be brought to bear against someone who is called mentally ill, prevented from defending themselves. So for somebody who's very hard fighting her own case and also trying to bring awareness to the fact that this is happening to people everywhere, I want to make sure that this situation right now, while I have this hotel room, that I do put as much address into her situation as humanly possible. The fact of the matter is that her story is a very important story. It shows human trafficking. It shows how expensive it is for the rest of us who pay taxes to have this happen. Some of you look at me and you say, oh, well, you're not paying taxes. You're just mooching. I paid my taxes for a lot of years until I was injured. I didn't choose to be injured. I didn't choose to get injured. Just like Kandace didn't choose to be victimized. She was just trying to help someone out. With me, I wasn't trying to get victimized. I was just trying to help someone out. I didn't know that helping Natalie Bollinger out was going to result in all of this. I didn't know that going and helping her and doing the things that she asked me to do was going to result in her getting embarrassed and having people harm me. Now, it wasn't her intention for her ex-boyfriends to do the horrible things they did to me. She didn't ask them to do those things. She just didn't understand how important it was to tell the truth. The more those people actually hurt me, the more they were, I'm sure, telling her what a horrible person that I am and she should ignore me and ignore everything that I say because I'm just crazy and I'm making stuff up. I didn't even have the ability to take screenshots to show Natalie. A lot of people believe that some of the abilities I have now, that I had just magically always had those abilities. No, people needed to teach me. Also, a lot of folks don't understand that when I'm in a state of crisis and have been stuck in a state of crisis, well, after about 2 to 3 months, it does start resulting in brain damage. And that state of fear, the longer it goes on, the more deterioration happens and the more afraid a person is. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's the thing that we're talking about with being poor. You lose everything because you were falsely arrested. And that's what you fear. You fear losing your family, losing your car, having everything taken from you, and you have to start from the very beginning because you can't start from the very beginning. Kandace, her story is different from mine because there's children, well, there's a lot of children involved in mine too, aren't there? For her, she's having to try to get her children back after they were illegally abducted, stolen from her. Because she was too poor to be able to actually fight them. I want to forget about my pain. But the abuse that caused that pain, I have no person to actually help me how I need to understand what resources I do not have and why it is important to take it seriously right now when it comes to turning in abuse against an at-risk adult. About not making it a whole bunch of questions. When it comes to a victim, I want you to imagine when it comes to an at-risk adult, a child, or the elderly, if they're coming to you and telling you about a crime committed against them, you need to treat it like it's rape. If an at-risk adult or a child comes to you and is telling you that they're being abused, I want you to treat that abuse as if it were rape, because that is what needs to be done. If they're being abused, they need to have someone there for moral support, someone who believes them, someone who will sit with them, someone who knows them well enough when the cops try to grill them as if they're some sort of lying POS, that person is there at that moment to say, hey, no, this is the victim. You do not get to treat her or him like this. Natalie didn't realize how badly her friends were hurting me. Maddie Boa wasn't going to explain that she was spreading horrible lies about me, claiming that I did horrible things to Natalie and Alicia that never happened. Natalie and Alicia could have come forward and told the truth. These people who lied to Kandace could have come forward and told the truth. The people who harmed Tamsin and Reggie Bowles, that should not have happened. Their children shouldn't have been taken. They shouldn't have been given false charges. None of these people should have. I've said a lot of really mean things, or so you think. Those weren't mean things, those were necessary things. Many of you want to call me a hypocrite for doing things back, or threatening to do some of the things back that people actually did to me. Well, some of the things that needed to be done, I absolutely did. Folks had good intent. A lot of people had good intent. They didn't intend on screwing me over. They just thought that their own experiences would help me. No, your own experiences don't help the victim. The victim has their own experience that needs turned in. If your friend tells you that she was raped and you want to tell her about the time that your uncle was raped in 1986, or the time that you were raped when you were in the military, and next thing you want to know, You're going off on a tangent about how nobody would listen to you when you were in the military and you were raped, so you're not going to listen to them complain now that they've been raped because you just want them to. No, no, that is not how you treat them, is it? That better fucking not be how you treat them. If someone comes to you about abuse, there is a particular order of business. When somebody has been raped, they need to have a friend or family member there with them who knows them and loves them to help them go through the process. They need to go to the hospital and get a rape kit, and they also need to get a hold of the police and make a report. Make sure that the evidence is collected, and make sure that your friend stays with you. Make sure your friend stays with you. If there's stuff that you have to do once you get to the hospital behind curtains, make sure that your friend's at least close enough that they can, if you don't serve, I can understand that, but make sure that they're close enough that you can hear everything that's being said. That is extremely important. Make sure that you record it always. That's because it shows somebody's frame of mind after being abused, after being intimidated, threatened, harassed, beaten up, or raped. Their chances of being blown off are exponential. The longer it goes on that their friends and family tell them that they just need to let it go, the more abuse they have to endure, and the more difficult it is for that person to trust anyone else. And they might even eventually run into somebody who's really going to help them. But by that point, they've already dealt with so many people that are schizophrenic, delusional, or believe that everyone has the resources that they have and that laziness is the reason people are victimized. I feel like if Kandace were to try to help me, that it would be taking advantage of her because of the horrible things that she's continuing to go through. Same thing with Reggie and Tamsin Bowles. But I do need their help. I do need the help of anyone who has any sort of a voice, even the tiniest. Even the smallest voice matters. Or at least they should. Those of you who pray, I'm sure that Kandace wouldn't mind. Those of you who want to get actively involved, I'm sure she could use the help. I'm super tired and exhausted, and there's a phone call I was hoping would be made earlier. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to call back or if this other lady was, but in the last few days, I've gotten like 5 different phone numbers from her, and a couple other really annoying situations, including, I guess, well, you know me, I take screenshots of everything when I can. I save it to the USB drives, and I save it to my other devices. I try to get it sent out to other people so that there's duplicates of it. Of course, it's all dependent on whether or not people actually care. For Kandace, I get the feeling that she cares about other people to her own detriment, and I'm the same way. People's assumptions are what we're harmed over, all of us out here on the streets. And for a woman to acknowledge that men have to deal with a lot of things that women don't have to deal with, well, there's a lot of women who have done that. And I want to thank you for observing the fact that we're abused in the way that we are. And that many times there are false allegations that are thrown out there just because somebody was angry. And that once it's out there, it becomes too late to take it back. I get that Maddie Boa, she was told by Alicia Bollinger that I had threatened their family. I hadn't. That was the furthest thing from the truth. But Maddie Boa, she had a big crush on both Natalie and Alicia Bollinger. She spread a lot of real hateful rumors. To this day, I still get abused everywhere I go as if I'm a stalker, as if I'm a murderer, as if I'm a rapist or a child molester, and literally, I've never been charged with rape or child molesting. Do you know why? Because sex is gross, and it's even grosser with children. When I was a kid, I was a victim of sexual assault, repeated and ongoing sexual assault. I know that when you're a child and you have no rights, and you're in a place like that, you are at the mercy of the adults around you. They get to do whatever they want. It is exactly the same as a homeless person. And I think I keep saying Caitlin Edwards. I'm sorry about that. I do know a Caitlin Edwards, but this is Kandace Edwards, whose story is in Alabama. She's one of many people who have been victimized in much the same way that I have. A lot of people complain that it's just the family courts, or it's just the elderly courts, or it's just the this, or it's just the black folks, or it's just... No, it's the poor. It is the poor. This bail thing has screwed me over so many times because the judge wants to believe whatever the officer tells them. And the officer's not going to tell them that they arrested you because you were trying to turn them in. Like I said, just like with when Selena, Not Afraid, disappeared, I tried to use people's hatred for me to help to find her. It kind of worked. I just wish she'd have been found alive. If Kandace or Tamsin ever had to go through the threats that I've had to go through, or the assaults that I've had to go through, the sheer number of assaults and abuse that I've had to go through, would I feel any worse for them? Absolutely, and I would probably spend a lot less time trying to focus on my own situation and a lot more time on theirs, because I can't stand the thought of this happening to another human being. Good to be radio. Thanks for coming to visit. Stay out of trouble or don't get caught. Remember, you are your brother's keeper, and no victim left behind, not even Kandace Edwards. I feel that asking her for help would be taking advantage of an at-risk adult. Do you know how horrible that feels? But she does have a voice, and no matter how small your voice, it can be mighty. We have to raise each other up. I'm not going to raise God up. I'm not going to raise Jesus up. That's not my job. I don't live with Jesus. I don't see Jesus getting physically assaulted. Jesus is not one of the people that I knew and loved in real life who ended up with their neck broken, or a bullet through their head, or a knife in the side of their head or in the center of their chest. Angus was killed by Spencer Crawford. I knew both of them. I knew Natalie Bollinger, who had her brains blown out. I've known a lot of people who were beaten to death, or overdosed on drugs, or were slipped fentanyl. I hope Kandace Edwards doesn't have to deal with all of that, but she's been homeless. She might not know how many of those people that She saw one homeless, ended up dead since then. Same thing with Tamsin and Reggie, they were homeless as well. I'm having a severe anxiety attack. I was gonna read a bunch of stuff about Kandace, but obviously I'm scared because come 11 o'clock tomorrow I won't have a safe place to be here and tell them, look, I won't have the money to rent a room for another night. And being able to explain that I don't have those abilities anymore is going to be very difficult.